Hey, you all, Farmer Jesse here. Here, that is, for one final No-Till Market Garden podcast send-off. I had the absolute privilege of sitting down this week with the three hosts, Alex Ball, Mimi Castell, and Natalie Lounsbury, to discuss the show, some of their favorite moments interviewing, but also just the state of farming, research, and conversation itself. I just want to send a huge thank you to everyone who has listened to this show over the years. I want to thank Michael Sellis and Jackson Roulette for all of their work on it. Huge thank you to all of our show sponsors over the years, all the hosts, including Mikey Densham and our Southern Hemisphere series from a few years back. Enormous thank you to all the guests who have contributed their time and expertise, and of course, to our many, many Patreon members who have helped to make it possible. Every one of you absolutely rock. I hope you all enjoyed this conversation as much as I enjoyed having it with Natalie, Mimi, and Alex of the No-Till Market Garden podcast. And cue the jam one last time, Michael. Today's episode of the No-Till Market Garden podcast is brought to you by Farmhand. I don't know about you, but I got into farming to grow food, not spend my time creating pack lists, writing newsletters, responding to emails, or maintaining web stores. If I could spend less time on my phone and computer and more time farming, that would be a win. Enter Farmhand. Farmhand is the only all-in-one virtual assistant built by and for CSA farmers. It takes care of the admin, managing orders, customer communications, and automating tedious tasks so you can get back to doing what you love. On average, Farmhand saves CSA farmers 6 hours a week. That's 6 hours you could spend with your family, out in the field, or simply taking a breather. So, what would you do with an extra 6 hours? Now's the time to get your systems ready for next season. Learn how Farmhand can help at farmhand.partners/no-till. All right, enjoy the show. All right, well, welcome to what I guess is kind of our last official No-Till Market Garden podcast, I suppose. But it's going to be a fun one. I am always excited to hang out with you all and talk a bit about what this experience has been like for everyone. So I thought we could kind of start out maybe with you, Alex. I thought maybe if you wanted to, give us a little bit of an idea of like what, this experience has been like for you, this show, and maybe give us kind of, I don't know, maybe one or two interviews that really stood out and what you learned from that.
Oh, thanks, Jesse. I really appreciate that. As far as like what I've learned, really kind of like pulled in from my time here is like just so grateful for the time to like hear people's stories and really just share those moments with each other. I feel like leading up to this, the idea of like talking to farmers for me was never anything that was going to be a profession or something that people would want to hear about. It was just, us rambling in parking lots for hours on end about garlic planting and like deep compost, something like that. So I feel like the last 3 years now of being able to talk to people, really having to really hone my skills in on, getting to people's story, getting to actual conversation and getting to the meat of things. I have felt like in the past I was maybe not that great at. I'd like to just keep it light. So being able to really talk to folks has been really eye-opening, and being able to really chat with folks, because if folks don't know and they can hear a little bit, I do have a stutter, and I never thought that I would be able to do anything that was involved with like talking in my life. I never thought that I'd be able to even speak with folks and folks people would want to hear that. So just being able to have a few years of just had my voice heard and talking to other folks was personally very uplifting for me to just have a little more self-confidence and to really feel like, I have something to say, or I have opinions or viewpoints that are worth something to hear. So just being on the podcast has been just uplifting for me personally. And as people might know, and as you all know, Jesse messaged me 3 years ago, and I thought it was just, to do a podcast episode. And I was like, oh my word, my dreams have come true. I finally get to be on the No-Till Growers podcast and share my story. And Jesse's like, no, we want to have you on to interview other guests, which just blew my mind. So just being able to be brought in an organization like this has been, I don't know, really helped launch me and maybe some self-confidence, help push myself forward. But really, maybe a lesson I really learned from some of my guests. Two things I'd like to say. My very favorite guest, and I think one of my more popular episodes, was Lindsay Steele of Garden Fort. I interviewed him again for my last episode. And he really talks about dialing your systems, picking core crops that you can do profitably, and really getting the market and dialing your systems. I tell folks all the time, it's not for everyone based on where you live on the local markets, but be able to dial in your product a little bit more was something I had to learn the hard way, because Lindsay, who's a friend of mine, came to town, started selling salad mix really, really well. And one day, my accounts were like, "Oh, sorry, we got this new guy." I'm like, "Who is this guy? Who's this guy who's upsetting my business?" And I got there, started learning from him, and just his model and the way he thought about business helped change the trajectory of my own business. It really helped me to figure out how I was going to settle in, how was I going to focus in and dial into a few products, or a few, products in the sense of either CSA or individual items you grow themselves. Really helped me dial in how I want to run my business. And I don't think I would have gotten there if I didn't have those outside forces pushing on me. And then once they pushed on me, were very willing to share their information with me. And really able to bring me in. So being able to talk to them, really, I think, was a really eye-opening conversation, and really helped grow my business. And then the second interview that really, something that I really learned, and I'm not going to call people out directly, but after almost 30 interviews and talking to all these different growers, the one thing I kept finding over and over again is that growers need to have community they rely on. We need conversation, and we need to have that community around us. And as you know, we're growing. It's spent so much time in the field, so much time at markets or by ourselves. It's really hard to maybe always find time to lock in and be around those people. And talking to growers, I really realized that, man, other farmers struggle with this as I do. They struggle with finding time to be emotional or to have emotional connections with other people in their field. So doing the podcast really opened my eyes to the importance of reconnecting with local people in my community, and making sure I make time to just spend meaningful time with growers who I care about. So I think the whole thing has really showed me, the whole podcast has shown me a real more personal than technical. I learned tons of technical things in the back end, but really, I think it just really pushed in my head the importance of really being close to those around me and making time to hear people's stories, and really, I can grow so much more as a person when I'm really just hearing people and not, trying to talk over them, which is something I can easily do.
Yeah, that's amazing. I think the isolation aspect of farming really is just goes, I don't know if the right term is underreported, but it certainly isn't something we talk about enough in this industry for people who are getting into it, perhaps, and like looking at land and looking about how to get into it. And I also wanted to say, Alex, like that when we were looking at prospects for hosts, I knew. I mean, when I kind of envisioned all of you together, I was like, I need a farmer. I need somebody who does something different, like something in the perennial realm, but like as a grower that's not necessarily a market gardener. And then I wanted somebody on the research side. And it was like you three kind of came together. And Alex in particular, I had heard your interview with Clara for the Winter Growers podcast. And I was like, I mean, you were enthusiastic and you were curious. And I was like, this is the person. Like, this is somebody that sounds like they want to keep getting better at this industry. And that's the kind of place that these questions, like the best farmer podcasts are the people that are like really have questions. And I thought, like, I just have loved what you've contributed to this show.
Oh, thank you. That means a ton to me. If anyone knows me personally knows that just like, I love farming. I love problem solving. I think we're all in the same boat. We love figuring out how the solutions to problems that we come up with daily. So I'm lucky to always have that curiosity in the back of my head at all times. And but yeah, no, I've been very thankful to be part of the show. It's been a really fun experience so far, and also I have two great guests, two co-hosts to share the spotlight with. So I'm pretty lucky.
That's awesome. Speaking of those co-hosts, if you were up for it, Mimi, I would love to hear a little bit about your experience with this. And in particular, I mean, have there been interviews that you've done that have really stood out, or like that you kind of think back on a lot, or anything in that realm?
Yeah. I mean, I also just want to say, that I have so enjoyed listening to your, like the three of you, and trying to find where, I can contribute something different. And that was hard. I mean, that was hard for me because I was kind of like, why do you want me? I'm like, you know, wine making, and such a different system. But I would say every interview I've done has helped me kind of identify different things that have been missing for me from the experience that I have kind of cultivated for my own system. And generally speaking, I'd say, I think farming in general kind of draws in people who are pretty inward facing, and spend a lot of time alone, being isolated. And it definitely resonates with me what Alex said about a theme kind of coming through over, the last 3 years, of people realizing at a certain point, you reach your limits even within your own system. You can grow and grow and grow, but you reach your limits when you're isolated from a community. And it got me thinking so much about the concept of community supported agriculture, and what it really needs to mean for farmers to be able to do the beautiful work that they do. And, there were a couple of interviews. One was Jim from Red Shirt Farm, and he shared some very personal sort of insight about his journey. But I have to say, my interview with Jackson was one where it just kind of all came together for me, how hard we work to, kind of stay in the game, and how big of a deal it is to start over multiple times. I mean, a lot of us have had to start over multiple times, and it's kind of incredible. I mean, it makes me think of that poem about how stoic birds are. I can't even remember the poem myself, but that you would devote yourself to something and be so in love with the work that whatever the hardship is, you keep coming back, and you keep trying harder, and you double down and you double down. And there was just such a theme of that. And it really kind of broke me open at a certain point, just realizing, wow, it's not just me who's felt this way. It's all of us. And wanting to work harder on that. I mean, I really did start, kind of bringing it up in every interview, and trying to get into people's individual journeys in that, from that perspective. So it definitely resonates with me what you said, Alex. And I feel like that was something I personally needed to find. And this podcast and doing the hosting helped me do that. So I'd say those were definitely two that stuck out. And just Jackson's story, and how devoted he's been to his community, his faith, his family, his farming, whatever that needs to look like, it's so inspiring. And it was really nice to be able to interview him.
Yeah. That I loved that episode. I thought that was a really good one. I mean, I've known Jackson for, I don't even know how long now, 16 years or so, 15 years. And yeah, his story is just like a very classic, unfortunate, in some ways, but also fortunate in many ways, story of the modern sort of getting into agriculture story of like, it's difficult and things fall through, and then you have landlords you have to deal with. And I'm like, yeah, it's a lot. And I thought that interview was really special, as well. So I'm glad you pointed that one out, because that would have been one I would have said. And also just Mimi, I thought I'll give my origin story for all of you since I'm doing it. But for you, and I know we've talked about this, but you were on Levi Dalton's podcast. What is it? What is his podcast called? I'll drink to that. Yeah. Doesn't even have the word wine in it. So shouts to Levi. But I was like, she is so funny, and she thinks like all of the stuff that and brilliant, but like she thinks about all the stuff we're thinking about with ecological farming and community and all these things, but brings it into, winemaking and this sort of perennial production world that we are not that associated with as much as we should be on the annual vegetable side. So I was just like, yeah, this is the perfect addition because we need that perspective. And I thought you brought so much to the interviews. Your wit, I loved the intros were like my favorite thing every time they would come up. I would listen to them multiple times. I just thought I was like, I would never be able to do that. Like it's a specific skill and it hit every time. I loved it. So, I can't say enough good things about all of you, and Mimi, you've just killed it. Right, Natalie, you're up. So, you give us a little bit about like what this experience has been like and maybe talk about some of those interviews.
Yeah. So it's interesting how we're all kind of coming to this personal growth for us as podcast hosts. And I definitely found that as well, that it was really challenging, like invigorating, but challenging. So I would find somebody I wanted to talk to, whether it was a researcher or a scientist. And, it's like, okay, emailing was one thing. Will you talk to me? There's always like a little bit of nerves, like, oh, I'm asking this person out on a date. And, usually people would say yes. But then like the prep work for that for me was a lot. Like I would read, if it was a scientist, I would read a lot of their papers or, just read all about what they've been doing and then think about, okay, how can I structure this interview? And so I guess I learned sort of it's super rewarding for me, but I didn't find that there was a way to expedite that process because like a lot of it for me is just the mental preparation to have a conversation with someone that, I think is going to be worth having and worth listening to. But I think what I learned was there are different styles of doing it. Like I really appreciated, one person I talked to, Ryan Fitzbeauchamp, who's a farmer who has a lot of grit. They had to overcome, losing their farm and moving their farm. But he was really funny because he was like, how about we scrap these questions that you've written out and you just like give me a word and I talk about it. And that was a really great way to do it. But in general, I would have like, these very, very detailed questions and I would try to stick to it. And I think that helped people to know what was coming in advance. And, they could think about their answers. But I also found that then people would like sort of naturally go into answering the rest of the questions. And I was like, I haven't asked that one yet. You know what I mean? So I don't know. Those were some lessons I learned, just like how much emotional energy for me it took going into every single interview, whether that was evident or not, or whether that's just because I tend to be, an introverted person. But it's kind of the same thing. Like when I go to a conference and I have a presentation to give, like it's a, 30-minute, 45-minute talk. And like afterwards, I think I could go sleep for 12 hours. So that's just kind of the way I am. I don't know how you're doing this daily thing, Jesse. I know like you're not interviewing, but just, I don't know, that amount of putting yourself out there is a lot. But it was also super rewarding. Like I felt like these conversations were just uplifting and, to see what the creativity, the grit for farmers and for researchers. I think research is like, it is gritty to do it. And there's not always an answer, which makes people uncomfortable. There's like, more questions than answers. But I guess I'm getting more comfortable like living in that gooey space of like, yeah, we're just learning and growing.
I love that, Natalie. And in fact, and I just want you to know, like all the preparation you did for those shows came through every time. Like I always felt like you kept the conversation going with that person. You always like, it was just, they were so rich, and I love that. And it was all the nerdy details we were looking for. And then, I mean, you did them on very fascinating stuff. Like, what was the berry one? What was the fruit?
Oh, the Haskell honeyberry.
Yes. I loved that episode. And I was like, I've like not even heard of this fruit. I have no idea what this is. And I listened to it and I was like, this is great. I love this. I just, yeah. And it was like, I think that's one of those things where the preparation and your enthusiasm for it came through. And I remember, to give your sort of where you came onto my radar, was your, was it soil organic matter was the theme of that podcast?
Yeah.
That podcast slaps. It's the best.
So good.
It's so good. And I'll make sure that it gets linked in the show notes, because it's just the best. It's a series. How many episodes was it?
It was 4.
It was 4.
Yeah.
And that was a Sarah project, wasn't it?
Yeah. And I feel like that was such a good example of how I work, which I know just doesn't work for everybody, but I just feel like getting as much information out there as possible is my MO. Like, I don't feel like you necessarily need answers, because people are going to, take all the information and they are going to create new things. And I guess that's how I approached my interviews too. Sometimes it is annoying even to me that I don't have answers for things, but I don't know. It's like, this is what we know now. It could change.
Right. I mean, I guess I kind of always think of, when it comes to research, I kind of always think of it like arrows. Like, it's like, now we're pointed this way a little bit more, or now we're kind of pointed this way, or now that arrow kind of split. Sorry. And we're going to have to follow both of these arrows. Like, how do you think about it? Like, I mean, you kind of just said it, but is there an analogy you tend to use?
No.
Fair.
I should think about that more. This is why you got to send questions in advance, because I definitely would need to prep that one. I don't know if there's an analogy for research, but I think the hardest thing about research is just to do it long term. Like, farming systems are long term. They're not 2, 3, 4-year projects. And research just isn't designed very well to accommodate that. So I would love to move towards research where that's really what we're thinking about.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, you mentioned the daily, and like, one of the things that I worried about in the beginning was not having enough subjects. Like, I was just like, I mean, if I'm doing 250 of these a year, what the heck am I going to talk about? I mean, there's 3 segments per episode. So it's like 700 minimum different segments. And I just like haven't run out yet. And it doesn't look like that's going to happen. And I think a big part of that is kind of what you were saying about like research and systems, is that farms are incredibly complex. They're incredibly dynamic, and they just have so many different elements you could talk about or really drive into. And I mean, I think like the research is so important because it illuminates areas because there's so many. Like, we need information about so many different aspects of this business to really make it functional, and where we're missing, information about it. So, and I mean, we're obviously thinking a lot about research right now in that regard. So, I don't know, maybe even Mimi could touch on that a little bit, and just like, I don't know, thoughts on research, thoughts on how it helps, and complexity of farms, all that stuff.
Yeah, I've been kind of hyper focused on this lately because of everything that's happening, and I, along those lines, I want to thank Natalie for her last episode closing. I mean, there are just so many heartbreaking things happening in science right now that hopefully we'll recover from. But what I've really come to appreciate with just being able to sit down and think about the questions that we need to solve for now, and how those questions are changing very rapidly, kind of at the pace of much faster than how we can even plan to try to solve for those, and how many people and how many resources it's going to take to try to meet the growing need for just being able to keep up with, from one season to the next. It's not on an obvious trajectory. And how do we set up systems just to be able to kind of deal with as much as possible, because that's sort of the way I look at it. And how much, and this was one of the things that I really appreciated about Natalie's organic matter series, is that there's this body of evidence from long ago that was a lot of sort of good observational information, but it's changed so much. And what we know now is so much finer detail, and it's still so blurry. If you think about it, like there's so much more we can learn. And the closer we get to having real insights, the less that disperses out into the world. And so it's been a real gift, I think, to be able to help share new information with people who have, sort of stalled out back in, the old information that we've sort of moved on from. But right now, in the current moment, we desperately need to be, kind of doing these long-term research projects that are sort of multidisciplinary and are looking at a lot of different facets, including the human side of things. And what it's not just about a farm, but what is the system that will support our agriculture going forward, and being able to ask those sort of brave questions without fearing any repercussions. It's an interesting time, and I love this community because I feel like there's a lot of support for asking and following those questions.
Yeah, I agree. Did that spark anything for either of you all? Like, I don't know, research community, those sorts of things?
Well, Jesse, you said it earlier, just kind of like how many different sides there are to this dice, right? From logistics to production to soil organic matter to just the marketing of products. Like to have a farm that makes it past, let's say, a decade, 15, 20 years, whatever, it takes a mastery. Or not a mastery, it's just like an ability to take in information that you can apply from so many different sides all at one time. And like, I think for a lot of us, those who, like myself, who are first generation farmers, kind of like, very full of love and passion for farming, you often get in a mindset of like, yeah, those eggheads don't know what's going on in the university. They don't know that. But then you go and you read interviews, research paper, like, oh no, they get what's going on. It's very clear. I have a doctor of anthropology I work with. He helps from my local college, and he sends me write-ups from his colleagues about like CSA marketing, about viability, all things like that. And when I read through these documents, I'm like, there's a plethora of information already out there that people have already established, that's kind of well-known information that you just need to tap into, that you need to take advantage of. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. So I think it's so easy to get caught up with an idea of like, oh, I know everything, or those around me, or that's the cap on information where we can learn more. But really, I feel like it's like anytime you go out there and start allowing yourself to learn more and more and more, like all you can do is better sharpen the sticks of all the 50 sticks you need to sharpen in order to to properly be a successful farmer.
Yeah, and in fact, that makes me think about, like, especially right now, where funding is so up in the air and it just feels like there's not much moving forward. It felt, or it has felt, at least over the last like 10 years with podcasts, but also just with the effort of researchers and all this stuff, like we were getting so close to these things really coexisting well, like the farm side and the research side really coming together. And it feels like that's like in limbo right now. And I hate that, because the momentum was there to really bring those things together. The science communication element, like that was really good. It felt like it was starting to get robust. Like I said, I've started to see more, just researchers trying to communicate their information more and it being more accessible in general. And so it's kind of an unfortunate moment in that. I don't know, Natalie, do you have anything to add on that side?
Well, I think there was a lot more emphasis on transdisciplinary research and participatory research. And so getting people to be less isolated, having farmer driven research, which I think was really important. And I don't know where that is going. I haven't heard anything specifically about like, oh, they want to get rid of transdisciplinary research, but I feel like, and hopefully this is just a small bump in the road. It feels like a bad time to have a bump in the road, like a really, really bad time. But sorry, let me think back to what I was saying. I guess I worry that the current administration and Department of Agriculture is unable to see the interrelatedness of everything. And so what they see is agriculture is agriculture. The environment is the environment. These two should not interact. And it's like, well, they do, and they are interconnected. So I don't know about the future of research, but yeah, people are connected to the environment. Agriculture is connected to people. Everything's connected.
When you like some of the stuff like with the Environmental Protection Agency, I'm like, of all the agencies, why would we take this one apart? Because that's like the water that you drink, it's the air that you breathe, it's the fishing pond that you like to go to with your kid, it's the forest that you like to go hunt your deer in, it's everything, and no matter who you are, you are absolutely unequivocally affected by it, and it's your food you eat, all of it. So, it's all of those things, and that feels very unfortunate. And but like you said, hopefully we are in a blip moment. It is an unfortunate time for it to happen, but hopefully talking about it gets people thinking about it more broadly, more holistically. There was also something that. This is kind of changing gears as I tend to do. But there was something also that you all were talking about. I think it started with me talking about just conversations and, the importance of conversations in general, and like how, rich it is to have a conversation. And I think like we don't, it feels like you shouldn't have to start a podcast for that, right? Like this is such a special experience to get to call somebody and just like pick their brain. And I don't feel like that happens very often. I was just at a farmer potluck this weekend where it was a lot of that. And I was like, this is so wonderful when we get to do this. Or when we were at the conference earlier in January at the Oak Conference. And I was like, this is so valuable. And you shouldn't have to, right, start a podcast to be able to accomplish that. But also at the same time, the challenge when you're doing a podcast is that sort of entertainment side, or that keeping it interesting for the listener side, which is kind of what Natalie was talking about, like the research and the preparation. So it's not exactly the same thing as a normal conversation. But I think when you send people questions and you like get them prepped, more often than not, I found that I get to just have a conversation because the questions put them at ease. It gets me prepared, and then we just talk. And I found when I started to do that more, I took fewer notes because I was just more engaged with the conversation. And I don't know. I mean, maybe there's something in there that sparks something for you all, but that's kind of where my brain went when we were talking about conversations and just like communicating with other farmers and researchers.
You said something about the last conference you were at and the ability to sit down with all the farmers and just chatting and picking people's brains. And this reminded me, so locally, we used to think of farmer beer night. And once a month, all the farmers in the county would come together and just sit down. And it just wasn't farmers. It wasn't farm owners. It was farm owners, farm laborers, policy people, folks with the markets. It's such a diverse group of people every month, just for 3 or 4 hours down talking. And unfortunately, during COVID, that went away, and it wasn't able to bounce back after that. But I almost feel like I yearned for that monthly sit down with friends, or people you don't see often, getting together, talking about growing, or just about the issues happening in the farm community. And like, are we at a point now with like time poverty where it's like, man, I don't have time to go see about other farmers, but I'll put on a podcast. I can hear, it's like I'm sitting next to a table with two farmers talking, and I can put questions into their, I can think about things, how it bounce off my head, how it affects me. But I think through all of this, what really drove home is that, man, I just got to spend more time with growers in my area. I have to make more time to do this thing, which is so difficult to do, especially when it's like middle of July and weeds are a mile high and whatever has to get done. But I think the value of that communication, that conversation, whether it be in a group setting or just that one-on-one, man, it's that, you really need that to sharpen yourself. You really need that in the industry talk time. And I know my fiance is just tired of hearing about growing green onions. She does not care anymore. I can't talk about it anymore. So to have other growers who I can waste their time with it, that's always good.
Yeah, Mimi, did you have something you were going to that sparked for you?
Very similar. Just I'm an introverted person. It's not that I can't, get into it, but I think that, a lot of farmers, we really kind of hide in a personality type. And that's not a criticism. I'm the numero uno there. But what I've really come to appreciate is that the way we live now allows us to sort of sink deeper and deeper into ourselves and deeper into these sort of, so self-isolationist systems. And there's something so critical to codependency, in a community where you start to realize how you can't do everything by yourself. And it's not even fun at a certain point anymore, because you start to wear that pressure over time, and it affects your family, it affects your productivity, it affects how you feel when you get up in the morning. And I think very similar to what Alex was just saying, I have to push myself. I have to really make myself go and commune with my community. And I'm always nervous about it. I don't know what the hell, when am I going to get over this? But I'm always nervous to walk into a meeting or walk into a gathering. And then when I get there, I'm like, what was I so resistant for? Because this has really topped me off. It's given me, more to be inspired by. So yeah, I want to hold myself accountable to that. And I loved the podcast for that reason, because it was sort of I got to find somebody cool to talk to and think of some interesting topics to talk about. But it's really hard. And I think it's gotten harder because we just live differently than if we set ourselves up to sort of embrace that. Codependent is I don't know, it's probably cooperative, I guess is a better term. But anyway, I think about that a lot, because I really do. I have to force myself sometimes with bribes.
Yeah, I know I don't want to just use this opportunity to bash what's happening with the administration, but one of the things that has been a problem for us that we've noticed, and that is a lot of the farm organizations that would organize these events that we would get to go to and talk to our fellow farmers, because we don't have the time to organize this. We don't have the capacity. A lot of those organizations are flat out defunded or not being funded at the moment. And that, with the Inflation Reduction Act stuff and they're just not in the climate smart stuff. Yeah, they just don't have any funding. So they're having to lay people off, and a lot of these organizations may not survive that. That is going to be tremendously bad for farmers, especially in the social element of it, because conferences aren't always a necessity. I don't always go there and learn everything I want to know, but I always have amazing conversations with people, and I meet new people, and it's incredibly enriching. And it fills that kind of, thing that we all feel a lot, is just that isolation element.
Yeah. It's so hard. I want this to be this was such a cool project. And I am so appreciative to you, Jesse, and for having that vision. I like how you explained it a little earlier. And so it's just sad that the conclusion of this project is, we're all feeling oh yeah, we really grew personally, and we did this amazing thing and had these conversations for folks, but now it just feels it's a sad and isolating moment. So that's it's just a bummer. But I think I recognize that was happening a little bit. So like I have started doing a craft night every third week with some friends, and like that little stuff does make a difference. And actually one of the people is Catherine Coverdale, whom I interviewed on the podcast. And she was the one person I had an in-person interview with. And I mean, she's just a lovely, lovely person. So it was easy anyway. But it was really fun to like sit at the kitchen table and have our two mics and just chat.
Yeah. Alex, you did a couple of those in person, didn't you?
Yeah. I was like I said off mic earlier. Like most of my interviews were like 3 hours long. It's an hour of like pre-talk, like creating a relationship, an hour of actual interview, then an hour of like emotional, like real talk at the very end. And then we cut down to an hour of actual listenable audio. So yeah, the in-person ones were the worst for that. It was just us, we'd sit down and we'd talk, just keep talking and talking and talking. And at a certain point, like, guys, we got to record this. Like, this is gold. We have to share this information. We can't just keep running our mouths and having fun. So that was the most fun part for me, was the in-person ones, just having folks together just to share. And like for me, in order for me to like understand when I should talk, like I need to see their mouth stop moving and then look at me, and I go, okay, now it's my time to talk. And I know. So having those in-persons were just really fun. And also, like we said earlier, like, man, there's nothing more fun than just talking to another farmer, just nerding out about something we all love. So if we can throw a mic in front of it in person and, you know, send it out to everybody else, man, what a bonus.
I agree. I feel like it's the conversations that I know I got to have over the years for this show, and just in general, when podcasters would call me and I would do their show, I was always just like, this is great. Like, I'm just going to geek out with you. Once I got comfortable doing the interview part and I felt confident that like, oh, people don't really care. Like, as long as it's mildly entertaining, nobody's going to be like, oh, that Jesse, I'm turning it off just because he said 3 words that are, you know, not great. So like I got over that, I guess, at some point, but it was just like having a conversation was when I felt like I was at, when it made sense to me. It was finally like, oh, I'm calling this person I know a little bit about. I've like researched it, and then we're just going to talk, and it's going to be fun, and they're at ease and I'm at ease, and it's all going to be a good time. And that's generally how it worked out.
You know, one thing I really loved in a lot of interviews, I think one of the ones I said, a few interviews I've done, I was like, hey, you know, if you have questions about this, you know, feel free to reach out. Like, let's connect outside of the podcast sphere. And most times, no one ever messaged me, but a few times folks reached out with like really technical questions and issues they're trying to work through. And I found that I made some really good friendships from folks who listen to the podcast, who were just so excited to then talk to somebody about a certain topic or a question they had. Like, I had someone who wanted to build like an online e-commerce platform for their farm. And I mentioned on my very first episode, or it may have been with Clara or something else, I said, hey, if anyone has any questions, feel free to reach out. And they did. And we had like a 2 or 3 hour meeting where we like helped him with his online website. And like just that little interaction, it made like it made all the work of the podcast, all that stuff. Like, man, this is what it's really about. It's like getting down and really, if we help one person, if one person can find some value from what I'm saying, then really, I don't know about y'all, but that's all I really cared about.
Yeah, that's very cool. No, that resonates with me. I think, I don't know, just seeing that people have connected to this show and to all of us, to all the hosts, to all the, you know, one interview, it may be like something that even just a handful of people are like, that was my one, but they really love it. And they'll like, people will talk to me about interviews that maybe didn't get the most views, that they still remember and that they still think about, or that like changed something that they did on their farm, even if it's just like a little irrigation trick or something. There's so much value in that. I love the idea of being able to have a conversation and then just let people listen in. It's amazing. Like, what an amazing piece of technology this is.
You're doing the daily I'm curious how that's feeling for you, and also if Alex or Mimi, if you're planning to do anything to fill the void.
Yeah, I can get mine out of the way. The daily is intense and it's a lot of work. I do think of it like I listen to a lot of dailies myself. Like I have at least two that I listen to every day, like the Daily from the New York Times. I listen to that every day, and then Kentucky Sports Radio. So it's like the other end of the spectrum because it's just dumb people. And a lot of times I'm like, it's kind of cringy, but they're like just a bunch of dudes that they've become my friends in my ears that I get to hang out with every day. And it's like a really nice thing to just, I don't know those guys, I've never met them, but I just get to hang out with them every day. And it's like a very consistent thing. And so like in developing the daily, I was like, I feel like farmers could use that, like just a dude they can hang out with every day. And it's like consistent voice, even if it's like, I don't know, I don't always agree with what he's saying or whatever, like it's there and they can listen or they don't have to, but hopefully they get something out of it or they just enjoy having this like consistent routine. I think that is the value of a daily podcast. Now, the challenge of it is that, like it's a lot of work, but we didn't get our, I will have to inform you. We're going to bring it up towards the end, but right now we didn't get our SARE grant. So, we're just going to keep rolling, and we hired a editor. And that's great. Like we can afford to do those things. But yeah, unfortunately, like our last gasp, I guess, to like kind of do more was that. So, and that kind of fell through, unfortunately. But we feel hopeful, like the daily's going well. And if it can continue in the direction it's going, maybe we can get back to that stuff. But it's a lot of work. It's a challenge. But yeah, I didn't mean to bogart that section. So I want to hear from Mimi and Alex about it, about what their plans are.
Before we go on, Jesse, how do you handle like interacting with listeners, or like maybe a podcast is different, but YouTube, that's a pretty different beast, and you have direct feedback from folks, and you hear a lot of, like you said, people might not agree with your opinion, so a lot of how do you handle that?
It's actually easier in the daily because it's so much, right? Like it's just like when it was harder, I think, when I would just put up a single YouTube video a week. And you're right, YouTube is just harder. Like when you put a podcast up, it kind of just goes into the ether. And I think Natalie's talked about this before, where it's like you put it up and then like you'll be walking down the street or something, or you'll be at a conference and somebody will be like, I loved that episode you did. Like that's the feedback loop is very slow. Whereas in YouTube, it's like instant. Our podcast went up like 20 minutes ago and I haven't checked in on it. But I'm sure there are already comments there. And some of them are probably like, Jesse, you're an idiot, which is fine, I think. But like the more you do that, I don't know, you just kind of get used to it. And sometimes it also, I don't know, criticism is complicated because sometimes people are right, even when they're wrong about how they tell it to you. And so you have to kind of parse through it a little bit, and you don't always have to read it. You can just be like, I don't know, this person's just having a bad day. Like I've got a couple people who listen a lot, like listen every day and complain all the time. And I'm like, if I can't fathom spending my time listening to somebody I didn't like I don't have that time. I would do anything else. I would do anything to have extra time like that. But I mean, it must bring them something. So I don't know. But I don't know. I think it's hard. I think it's always hard. There's always a human being on the other side. And, I think you get more used to it, but it doesn't feel good. It never is like, oh, great, another person telling me I'm an idiot or telling me I'm wrong or telling me, like whatever. It's weird. It's weird. It's a weird world that we live in. And I kind of wish people would accept that who you are online is a real person and it really does affect other people. I guess I've grown tough skin, but it's just like, I don't know. It's not easy to live in tough skin, right? It's like, it's a weird world. So I don't know. Sorry. I once again kind of bogarted this section. So
I don't know what I'm going to do to fill the void. I mean, it's not to say that I ever had time for anything that I do in the first place, but I think about just what I got out of doing the podcast and how whether it was having to read a bunch of papers or go and research somebody's background or whatever it is, that I love that. I mean, it really scratches an itch for me. So, I mean, I've thought about starting a journal club or something like that where, we read papers and then come together and share. But as far as like putting it out there for people and what you all did, Jesse and Michael and Jackson and everybody behind the scenes, I'm so kind of in awe of what it really took to make that all happen and how high level it really, really is, because I just sat down and recorded stuff in a very bumbling manner, and it always ended up sounding really great and professional. So whatever I do to fill the void, it will be unprofessional and not put out into the world so that people can listen every day and complain about it. I'm not looking to be that medium for somebody's need to come, the peanut gallery to come out and start hucking raw chicken at me. So, but it's everybody's got their thing, right? Natalie, you want to join my journal club?
Yes, definitely.
What are you going to do? Alex, are you going to keep going? Or are you going to keep yours going?
I don't know. I think, I don't know. I think I see, like, I want to maybe broaden what I'm talking about. Like, recently I've seen locally kind of a lot of young people who want to feed their communities but don't know what route to take. Like, when I started farming, I was only 19, and I saw a lack of food access and said, oh, I should grow food. But the deeper I got into the community, I'm like, oh, if you want to increase food access, there's 10,000 things to do before you start a farm, right? There are 15 other businesses you can do, 15 other nonprofits you can do before you like go and buy land and start ripping the ground up. So I feel like maybe some type of, I don't know, a guide or something, or a Substack, something to help other young folks getting into food. Be like, hey, listen, you have a real passion for food in your community, but you honestly have like 6 months before you go back to school. Don't start a farm. Go volunteer at your local, at local nonprofit that's recovering food and giving it out to people in your community. So like, I wish I maybe create a resource, something that I wish I had. But as far as like interviewing farmers directly, I think that for me personally, I just have to double down on like my in-person relationships, because man, it's so hard to have a real conversation with someone when you yourself are not doing well. And I've talked about other podcasts, but we sold our farm after a huge flood, moved properties, and through all of that like turmoil like that, like I wasn't in a great mental space. Like in my head, I just wasn't in a good spot. And it's really hard to be open and accepting and hear someone else's life when you yourself are just in a really like mentally bad space. So I'm like, man, I think I really just want to double down on those in-person relationships and really connect with those around me who are giving me that kind of reciprocal relationship. And then once I can like stand on my own 2 feet mentally, be like, okay, how do I then help extend this to other people as well? In the sense of, expanding education information. So for now, I'm just going to be working on the farm. I got to redo this mobile farm trailer and do all this. I am, yes. It's great for a audio medium, the video. So yeah, I got to rebuild this whole farm trailer and then launch that off and try to survive this season. So I think this year, with everything going on, with all the federal funding cuts, and we got hit pretty hard by that. So I think this year is going to be us kind of like, locking in, making sure that we stay here another decade. Because we all know easily in farming, 1-2 bad years can really knock you off the pedestal. So I'm really trying to just like maintain my own self. And it seems like when things calm down a little more, I'll be able to have enough capacity to actually help those around me.
Natalie, you kind of touched on it, but what's next for you?
Oh, well, it's interesting. So I think like when Alex was talking about that sort of more local, people who want to help with food access, and it sparks in my mind this question of audience, which I've been thinking about a lot in terms of material. And so, like coming into the podcast, like you had such an established audience. Like that was really the reason why I was like, I can't say no, because you have so many people listening to this. And if I really want to reach people and make a difference, like this is an incredible opportunity. And you had built up that audience. And so thinking about what's next for me, if I were to do a podcast in the future or something, it's like, well, who is my audience and how do I build it? And so I love Alex's idea of, having something be a little more local, maybe, or targeted at, people who want to do a specific thing, even if it's not like farming, but it's sort of the topic of food access. And so I've thought a lot about audience and then a lot about how you organize things. And so like Jesse, I feel like you have enough of a personality, unlike the rest of us who are bland. No, but you have people who are interested in what you have to say, and then you have this topic of the small scale no-till. So you're sort of topically and like your personality that sews together your show. And I've thought like, well, would it be a topic like soil organic matter, nice bundle that up and put it out there? Or is it more about just people I think are interesting who are doing cool things? And so I just don't know how I would organize it. Who's my audience? I have so many ideas for things that would be cool. I have zero time. But yeah, that's where my head is. I think that it's just like such a powerful way of sharing information and good vibes. But I don't know how to take the next step.
Yeah. And I should say though, and I don't speak for the audience, but I'm going to do it. They would all tune in to whatever any of you all do again, and we will make sure to promote it heartily and heavily. And all of you are so incredibly brilliant. It's been such an honor to be able to work with everyone and to get to hear your podcasts and hear what subjects you chose and what you were interested in. And I know how much work each one of you put in. And and I know everybody listening feels the same way. Like it's been an incredible journey. I mean, this show has been going, would have been like in November would it make 8 years, I think. So yeah, it's been I really appreciate you all like continuing it on. And, I just can't say enough about like how, honored I am that all of you said yes and gave us such amazing information.
Well, Jesse, thank you.
So thank you all.
Thank you, Jesse, for bringing us on board, and not only for inviting us to be part of this organization you built, but also for 8 years of like amazing interviews that like I feel like many other small growers, when you came on the scene with the podcast and the content, we were like, oh, finally something that's dialed in for us. And that felt really, really good. So I really personally appreciate all the work you and Jackson did, and everyone else behind the scenes as well, who just killed it.
Yeah, I mean, I should give credit to Jackson. He did an enormous amount of work to get this thing going, and has been, continues to be, and will probably always be, such a huge help and such a huge supporter of this movement. And yeah, he definitely deserves his flowers too.
Jackson is like the nicest counter dialogue to my mean internal dialogue when I'd be like, you screwed it up again, and Jackson's like, it's all good. Yeah, we'll do the best with what we got.
Or like when Mimi started erasing the entire Dropbox and was like episodes were disappearing as fast as they could be uploaded. He was very, very chill about it.
Also,
Yeah.
my very first 3 episodes, so I recorded all 3 of them, and then somehow like the SD card got like damaged, and I lost them all. And luckily my fiance like found some program and like somehow recovered what she could from these 3 episodes. But like I remember being my very first 3 episodes of the show and being like, no, what have I done? I've ruined the network. I'm a failure.
Well, I mean, yeah, especially coming from the background being that I started the podcast like recording in my on my iPad it's an older iPad, but yeah, just literally like on my iPad, my voice calling people in my walk-in cooler, like the standard was set. So the bar started so low and like we could all just do what we wanted to do. And Jackson came in on board on that and was just like, okay, well, we're going to make this work for farmers because, none of us are, I definitely didn't go to school for audio engineering or anything like it. So yeah, we're just making do and everybody did an awesome job.
It's a good family. Everybody's been super awesome and all the collab, the flowers, the seeds, the compost, the winter growers, everything has been really high level. I mean, very, very high level, if not high production from day one. I think it's come a long way and it's helped a lot of people. And I feel really lucky to have been even a little tiny moment of it. And yeah, I can't wait to see where you guys take it from here.
All right. Well, let's all stay in touch and we will make sure that no matter what you all do, that we'll let the audience know about it over and over and over again. So I just love all of you and I appreciate all of your time and that you've put into this project. And like I said, it's just been such an honor.
For us too. Thanks,
Yeah.
Jesse.
Thank you so much,
Stay
Jesse.
in touch, definitely. Stay positive.
Yeah. Likewise.
Hang in there.
Keep on farming, right?
Yep.
That's right.